We're still having fun with color, and right now I've got Lisa Myers from Fairmount Fibers with me. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Uni.
And we're going to talk a little bit about this beautiful tam.
Okay, this is a very traditional Fair Isle style beret or tam with a star pattern worked in the middle. It's made out of a silk blend yarn that's kettle dyed.
Silk and wool?
Yes,
okay.
Merino wool. Yep.
So it's got this really beautiful semi-solid kind of effect here.
It almost shimmers. It's pretty terrific.
So it's the Fair Isle style, right?
Mm-hmm. So the yarn is stranded along the back of the work, the color not in use. I like to work my Fair Isle with one color in each hand. So when I need the green, I use my left hand. When I need the plum, I use my right. This ensures that my yarns don't tangle as they reach the ball, and it gives me a very neat back surface here. Everything stays parallel, and it's easier to tension them separately for me than it is to work them both in one hand. When I work a pattern like this, of course, I have to use a chart. And the chart shows me 1 square equals 1 stitch, what color each stitch should be. This chart's actually been printed out as if I were going to work flat. You can see that the row numbers are at opposite ends, because if I were working back and forth, I would come across this row, and when I got to the end, I would turn my work around and come back there. But of course, we're in the round, so every round begins with the first stitch at the right side of the chart. A lot of people suggest that you use a sticky note or something else to mark your place on the chart by putting it to show the round you're working on. I find it easier to go the other way and mark off what's above the work, because now I can see how my pattern is emerging. One of the great things about working in the round is that I can see the design. I'm always looking at the good side, and this way I can line everything up and make sure that the stitches are always in the right place.
It's a really great way to learn to read your knitting.
Because that's much easier than having to count 3 stitches in one color, 1 stitch in another, to be able to see what the pattern wants next.
Absolutely.
Okay. This has got a very traditional corrugated rib at the bottom, and I want to take a moment to show how that's done, because it's a little different than usual stranded knitting. Again, I keep 1 color in each hand, but I've got purl stitches here. This is done as a knit 2 with brown and a purl 2 with gold, which means that I have to bring the purl color forward and work 2 purl stitches this way. But the important thing is to remember to take it back so that the floats stay on the back side of the work. Because if you forget, then you're going to wind up with wrong colored floats on the front of your work.
So just knit just a couple more stitches so we can all see.
Sure.
And I know that when I knit corrugated ribbing, it's really easy to make it to pull the floats too tight on the back.
Indeed.
What do you do to combat that?
I make sure that my stitches are spread out well on my right needle. Before I go into the new colored stitch, I want to make sure that the float is fully stretched past these stitches, that they have enough breathing room. It's maybe particularly important when I'm moving to the purl stitch, because it's easy, if the purl color is in my right hand, to pull this tighter than it wants to be.
Great.
So, concentration.
Great. Well, and let's talk a little bit about color. And by the way, if you've missed any of this, the pattern for all of this and the tips will be on the website. But let's talk a little bit about color, because there's so many beautiful things that you can do. That's kind of the fun part.
Absolutely, and yet it's, I think, a part that intimidates a lot of knitters. They want to choose colors of their own instead of just making what they see in the pattern, but they aren't confident that theirs will look good. And I've got a few tips for that. Our eyes see contrast first. So I've got the colors here. These 3 colors are background colors, and when you take them as a set of 3, they're really quite different, the brown and the plum and the rust. But if I add in the bright gold and the sharp green, there's a lot more difference between either of these accent colors than there is between or among the background colors.
And when you're talking difference, you mean difference in value or in sort of how dark or light the color is? In
at least those 2. Value, darkness and lightness, is what we see first. But these are also much brighter colors. This is a duller color as well as being a darker one. So we've got these accent colors that are both lighter on a scale of white to black and also more saturated, sharper and brighter. So when we get into the tam, this reads very clearly, and the background colors kind of blur together. The accent is what you see.
It's really wonderful. I mean, just the sort of variety of things that you can get. The silk and wool blend just really takes the colors so beautifully.
Because the wool and the silk take the dye a little bit differently. So you always get this kind of heathering in the yarn.
So it's got a real depth to it.
Right. Moreover, because these are kettle dyed, even the solid colors are frequently not solid. This tam, the variation is almost exclusively in value. It's almost entirely neutral, so we have everything from a very dark black to a very pale neutral. It's not white, but it's pretty pale. If you look at the skein by itself closely, you'll see that it's not a white, it's not even a neutral. There's some oyster in there, but there's some green, there's a color that's almost pink. Similarly, one of the dark ones here, it might seem brown or gray overall, but when you get up close and personal, again, we've got bits of green and bits of something almost blue. And yet, when they start working against each other in the knitting, the variations within each skein fade away because the more important difference is between the light and the dark. So you get a lot of subtlety and a lot of richness in the pattern, but you still see the star pattern very clearly.
Well, and that's, I mean, I really love seeing semi-solids in a colorwork pattern. It just really gives it so much depth. It's really lovely. So let's just talk briefly about this one over here.
Here's one where you have very little light to dark variation. One of the greens is a little lighter, but mostly your variation is of hue. That is, what's blue, what's green. The pink color is, of course, very sharp, and that's what you see first. But this is the one of the three where I think the pattern shows least because the colors are so close in value. They're all very mid-range colors.
So you really shouldn't be afraid. It just takes a little bit of experimentation.
Absolutely. It's worth a shot.
And what would you do, you know, if you wanted to, like, for example, if somebody wanted to take one of these planned colorways and then just switch out one color, would that be a good way to get started?
Absolutely. It would be very easy here to change this accent color for almost anything else. If you don't like purple or you don't like red, move it to a blue, move it to a gold.
Well, great. These are some great tips.
Knitting Daily. Make time for yarn every day. Visit our website for free access to all the patterns, project ideas, tips, and techniques from this season of Knitting Daily. Log on and get printer-friendly patterns and more at knittingdailytv.com. This is show 306. Take your knitting to the next level. Visit knittingdailytv.com for your free e-booklet of 13 tips, hints, and secrets to improve your knitting skills from the designers featured on Knitting Daily TV. Knitting Daily has been sponsored in part by Interweave Magazines and Books, inspiring, encouraging, and supporting creative self-expression through art and craft media. Interweavestore.com. Webs, America's Yarn Store, a source for knitting and crocheting yarns and supplies. Yarn.com. Taki Stacy Charles, feel the desire, knit your passion. TakiStacyCharles.com. TNNA, the National Needle Arts Association, the organization for independent needle arts retailers, TNNA.org.